friends, Jewel back again, and I thought today we would talk about something a little bit different. I get a lot of questions regarding placements about fidelity and somebody's capacity to be true or to be honest in relationships or to be sexually faithful. You know, what kind of placements are kind of for and against that. And I actually see a lot of affairs in my practice because I am a relationship and intimacy astrologer. I see all kinds of relationships, but I see my fair share of affairs, and they have very similar patterns. And the people that have them or engage in them have typically very similar alignments in their charts. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about what you, what you see in the synastry and composite charts of affairs, and a little bit about what personally in the natal chart can kind of contribute to that or cause that type of orientation towards the world. So the number one thing that we see in the composite charts and in the synastry of people who come together in an affair type situation is the sun square to the moon. So that is one that is very, very attractive in the beginning stages of a relationship. It presents two people with a view of each other where somebody's sun is square somebody's moon in synastry, where they see something that's very different and very, very attractive in that opposites attract, or that it's like the energy between them is just like this, for lack of a better word, this grinding type of energy. So it really translates into two people being very, very heavily attracted to each other. It's not a very stable relating, and actually tends to fizzle out after a certain amount of time. Now, there are couples who have a long-lasting relationship that do have their sun and the moon square. It's kind of rare, but it does exist. You have to have other really, really good moon linkages in other places to really have that one going on. You have to have a lot in the 11th house. So in the composite chart, when you have the sun square to the moon, number one thing that is an indicator of that this is an affair. It is difficult to live long-term with a sun square the moon in a composite chart because it's really showing that the male and the female in the relationship are kind of working at cross purposes with each other. So it's heavily fiery and attractive in a coming together and flying apart type situation. It is not easy to manage on a day-to-day basis and becomes extremely irritating. Now, some people, can live with that, like the royal couple that keeps breeding, the long-haired girl, nice girl. They have their sun square to the moon in their composite chart, and they seem to be making it work. Now, they actually have a lot of challenges, you'd be surprised, in their synastry, their composite. They actually go at it behind the scenes. She's the one that has the power in that relationship. So it's hot, but it's difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis because the people's styles are so different. They really get in each other's way and get on each other's nerves, but they sure want to do it. So another one that we see, and it can also be not just the square, but also the sesquiquadrate, which is more rare, or the semi-square, also in composite charts of affairs between the sun and the moon as well. Another one that's very, very, very common is the sun, the moon, or Venus, especially Venus in the composite chart between two people who are having this type of relationship. Because the 12th house is the house of hidden things and the house of secrets, and also the house of hidden bed pleasures. Perfect place for the Venus, Sun, or Moon to be in the composite chart of two people who are engaging in a secret sexual affair. So if you have the Sun, the Moon, or especially Venus in your natal chart, this is something that we see in the natal charts of people who get into these types of relationships, because especially Venus in the natal 12th house, the love nature is somewhat inaccessible when you're in the company of other people. They think their love very well. They imagine their love very well. They fantasize about their love very well. They do not really do it that well in real life. Because, first of all, when any planet is in the 12th house, it's very difficult to define what the needs are of that planet. And really, Venus is the planet of our desires and our needs when it comes to our foundational security. It's very difficult to pinpoint what those needs and desires are with the Venus in the 12th house in the natal chart. So a lot of times they actually express their love nature better or more comfortably, or even are able to at all in the context of a hidden relationship. So the Sun or the Moon as well can contribute to that type of happening, because the Sun is somebody's identity, the Moon is somebody's inner emotional nature. So it's common to see in the charts of people that do have affairs that their love nature is going to be oriented in a more secretive type of way. Their emotional nature, their moon, or their identity is going to be oriented that way as well. Not always. Not everybody that has a 12th house Venus is going to have issues with this, or Sun or Moon, but it is one of the things that can more contribute to that outlook on life and on behavior. So, composite Venus or Mars square the ascendant or in conjunct the ascendant is another one, because that really shows that either the Mars or the Venus between a couple is hidden back behind the ascendant, especially if it's in the 8th house. So it's really signifying that the relationship nature Venus, or the sexual nature Mars, is in a secretive place in the house of sexuality, the 8th. Sometimes you can see that in the 6th as well. It's more weird, though, to have a composite Mars or Venus in the 6th house. It's pretty common to see it in the 8th. Another one, somebody's natal Mars being in conjunct their natal ascendant can contribute to this type of behavior too as well. Pluto also in conjunct the ascendant, we can see their sexual nature coming out in the context of an affair, because that is one of the ways that they actually meet their Pluto or see their Pluto or their Mars and are able to wrestle with it or see it or work it out or work it into their nature, because in an in conjunction, that's a whole another video. I have videos on that. You can find that, planets in conjunct to the ascendant. They could just be more oriented towards showing up in a secretive way, because they are not easily funneled out through the ascendant, which is the personality, the persona of somebody. So you see them acting out somewhat irrationally back there in the background. So composite Pluto in conjunct the ascendant as well is one that can point to that the sexuality is happening in a secretive way in the background. So let's see, personal planets in the 12, we talked about that. Personal planets in Pisces. Venus in Pisces, Mars in the 12th also can express similar to Venus in the 12th, because the actual drive, how they get things, is hidden up in the 12th house of hidden bed pleasures as well. Usually, though, it's going to be Venus that is more prone to this type of thing. Neptune represents the 12th house in Pisces. So Neptune in heavy contact to somebody's, natal Mars or Venus, sometimes Moon, can signal somebody who's more prone to expressing their love or sexual nature in the context of the 12th house, because we have Neptune throwing that Neptunian energy onto it. Mars square to Neptune in a composite chart can show a certain amount of cheating that goes on within a relationship. Not that it is an affair itself. Sometimes you can see that. Usually it's pointing to two people. The sexuality is unusual in some way. So that can show up in several different ways. One way that's really common is that it's lying and cheating within a relationship. Oftentimes, Mars square at Neptune in a composite chart is representing that these two people are subtly weakening each other's strengths over time. So it's a weird energy to have in a composite chart. If it's the only thing that's going on there, or one of the only things that are difficult in a composite chart, you can handle this one. But if you've got several things and this one, it's like, ugh, it really sucks. So Mars square Neptune in a natal chart can point to the same things, especially in a man's chart, if Mars or Neptune is ruling the 8th house, placed in the 12th, square to Mars or Neptune. So I'm talking about Mars-Neptune square. Mars is ruling, or Neptune is ruling the 8th and is placed in the 12th, square to Neptune, usually down in the 3rd. So this is one where we see somebody's sexual nature being represented by Mars coming to the house of secrets and being square to Neptune, which is throwing more of that 12th house energy onto it. This one is really common in the charts of men who have a very secretive sexual nature that is very odd, and where some kind of addiction or sexual addiction or inappropriate sexual contact or substances are necessary in order for sexual stimulation. This is one, when you see this in the natal chart of a male, that is really kind of a red flag as to how he is oriented to using his Mars. In a composite chart, it has its own issues. In the chart of a woman who has her natal Mars square to Neptune, it can show up as a different sexual nature. Bisexuality is very common. Mars opposite to Neptune is actually really common in the charts of lesbians. So it's a sexual nature that is more open and less restricted by boundaries when we have the square. You have to look at everything. Lots and lots of times when you see Mars square to Neptune in a woman's natal chart and a man's, it's talking about very early sexual abuse or inappropriate sexual contact, or living in an environment where the male figure was very inappropriately abusive in some way. So it doesn't always mean sexual abuse. 90% of the time, that's what you're going to see. Not always. You have to look at everything. So usually, too, when you see that Mars square to Neptune in a female's chart, she is going to be, especially if Mars comes into the 12th or is in retrograde or is in a sign it doesn't necessarily do well in, like Cancer or Pisces, it can express as her men have this issue. So it can show up as she's projecting this onto her men, and she's seeing her men have inappropriate drives. Another one is Venus in aspect to Pluto, because the love nature has kind of this 8th house secretive influence, and Venus in hard aspect to Uranus or conjunct Uranus, because Venus and Uranus together gives somebody a very exploratory orientation towards their sexuality. Mars conjunct Uranus in the composite chart very much shows somebody who probably is already involved when they've gotten into this relationship. So that's also one that I actually see quite a lot of the time. So I hope you found this informative. Please subscribe to my channel if you did. I'll be back with more super cool videos. You can find me on the internet.